It is Tuesday, the 13th of October, 2020. I'm looking at the Facebook page created by one Martin Byrne, From Cliffoney to Crossna, the story of Father Michael O'Flanahan. Cliffoney remembers Father Michael O'Flanahan. And Martin posts a fair bit of material about ancient Irish, prehistoric sites, well before Christianity came to Ireland. And 23 minutes ago, according to this, he shared one of my Facebook posts about the raid sun symbols on Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns. Dowth is a passage tomb in Ireland, over 5 millennia years old, probably one of the earliest passage tombs created. And on it has, on a lintel stone, in other words, a stone outside of the cairn, the hill around the outer edge of it, there's a stone called the Stone of the Seven Suns, and it has essentially 7 rayed sun symbols, and 4 of them are very much like this one. Very, how can I put it? I'd say very accurate depictions of a total solar eclipse. We see the inner circle is pitted heavily. I believe that's intentional. I believe that's to try to make it appear darker than if the stone was left unpitted. Then we have the ring around the pitted, and I believe intentionally darker central circle, which I believe represents the chromosphere, the inner corona of the sun, usually seen as a red pinkish ring all around the moon occulting the sun. And then we see quite evenly spaced radiating spokes all around, which I believe represent the outer corona. And it does, as we saw in that GIF, which I might just see if I can play again. Maybe not. No, maybe. There we go. Yeah, so what we're looking at there is a astronomical drawing. The gray, the black and white and gray image, is a scientific astronomical drawing of a total solar eclipse. I believe the 1851 total solar eclipse. So this was a drawing done by a professional astronomer for scientific purposes. And as we can see, it's pretty much identical to this particular petroglyph stone carving, rock art, on Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns. So I'm just going to scroll down because he reposted a whole thing that I posted during the winter solstice last year. So I think I'm just going to read it. I don't think I've read aloud much of my writings, but I think I will read aloud this. Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns first came to my attention when I was researching the influence of total solar eclipses on the religious beliefs and practices of ancient religions in the early 1990s. I was browsing through the stacks of the Anthropology and Archaeology section of Concordia University's Webster Library when I noticed a Time Life book about prehistoric megalithic cultures titled The Monument Builders by Robert Wernick. I decided to flip through this book to see if it contained any relevant information, and soon came upon a color photograph of one of the rayed sun symbol petroglyphs that are carved into Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns. This photograph was captioned, "Either the sun or an eye may be signified in this carving in a curbstone of a retaining wall that was built to protect the base of a burial mound at Dowth, County Meath, Ireland." So note that it says either the sun or an eye. I knew from my previous Eclipsology research that this caption was a classic false dichotomy, because this rayed symbol could, and almost certainly did, represent both the sun and an eye. More specifically, this rayed sun symbol petroglyph almost certainly depicted the total solar eclipse eye of God that modern eclipse observers perceive when the sun is totally eclipsed by the moon, and its coronal rays radiate outwards from the black hole in the sky that is formed by the moon's disk occulting the sun during totality. One can be quite sure that if well-educated modern observers of total solar eclipses, such as professional astronomer Jack Zerker, can perceive a total solar eclipse as a metaphorical eye of God staring down from the sky during totality, that our prehistoric ancestors could, and did, have the same perception of total solar eclipses, and most probably took it rather more literally. Let's just scroll up here. Ronald Giovanelli, Rolf Sinclair, and other scientists have argued that the radiating sun motif that is found all around the world is inspired by and depicts the rays and streamers of the sun's corona that are only seen during the total phase of a total solar eclipse. Without making any connection with the total solar eclipse eye of God, anthropologist Marija Gimbutas nonetheless recognized that such rayed sun symbols may also be interpreted and understood as being a radiant divine eye motif. Gimbutas has explicitly, and I have every reason to believe quite realistically, described such rayed sun symbols as a compound eye sun symbol. In other words, it represents both the sun and an eye. And from my perspective, it essentially is inspired by what modern eclipse observers call the eye of God, i.e., the similarity of the total eclipse sun to the pupil and iris of an eye staring down from the sky. So to continue on, the compound eye sun symbols that are carved into Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns are eminently comparable to certain 19th century scientific astronomical drawings of total solar eclipses. The inner circle of each rayed sun symbol appears to be deliberately pitted to darken it, just as the moon is darkened when it is directly aligned between the Earth and the Sun during a total solar eclipse. It is even well within possibility that the heavily pitted surface of the inner circle of the compound eye sun symbols carved into looks like I got a typo there, I need to fix, carved into Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns was also intended to represent the cratered surface of the moon. If this hypothesis is correct, it would indicate that the prehistoric Irish artists who carved these rayed sun symbols understood that total solar eclipses are caused by the Earth's moon passing directly in front of the sun and hiding it. An unpitted or clear ring surrounds the pitted inner circle, and this ring is of a thickness that is similar to that of the bright ring of the sun's crimson chromosphere, which completely encircles the lunar disk during totality. Several straight lines radiate outwards from this inner ring to an outer circle that delineates the outer limits of this compound eye sun symbol, also known as a radiant divine eye. The only significant difference between the prehistoric petroglyphs at Dowth and astronomical drawings of the total solar eclipse that were made by astronomers during the 19th century is that the latter representations tend to show considerably more radial spikes in the sun's corona than Dowth's rayed sun symbol petroglyphs, which depict between 1 to 2 spokes radiating outwards from the inner circle. A verbal description of the sun's corona, as observed by 6 German eclipse observers during the July 28, 1851 total solar eclipse, which was published in volume 21 of the Memoirs of the Royal Astronomical Society of Great Britain, says, "The crown of rays, i.e. corona, had, from its very intense but not dazzling splendor, the greatest resemblance to the halo around the head of a saint. It formed a white, shining ring equal in breadth to half the moon's radius, out of which 12 to 14 white rays extended themselves, inclined to each other at equal angles, and of the length of the whole radius. No change or movement could be seen in them during the 3 minutes duration of total darkness." So this verbal description of a total solar eclipse basically corresponds to the symbols on Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns, at least the one in the image. There's 4 like that. There's 4 very similar to that, and then there's others that are, I'd say, cruder rayed sun symbols, but there's 4 that I consider to be scientifically accurate depictions of a total solar eclipse. So let's continue on. This comparatively modern scientific description of the 1851 total solar eclipse aligns remarkably well with the rayed sun symbols, also known as compound eye sun symbols, which were carved into Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns 4 to 5 millennia earlier. The Dowth compound eye sun symbol that is pictured in the monument builders depicts the sun's corona with 17 rays that are divided by more or less equally spaced radial lines. The number of rays depicted on the other radiating sun or radiating divine eye petroglyphs at Dowth, as well as in other regions of the world, varies considerably. So there are differences, but they are pretty much the same thing. This compound eye sun symbol petroglyph on Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns is remarkably similar to a scientific astronomical drawing of the 1851 total solar eclipse that is depicted in Figure 2 of Plate 6 of Volume 21 of the Memoirs of the Royal Astronomical Society. The sun's corona, as it is depicted in this scientific astronomical illustration, is divided into approximately 17 quite distinct rays. These rays are separated from each other by a series of darker areas regularly interspaced between them. If one were to ask the artist who drew this picture of the 1851 total solar eclipse to carve the same image into stone with a hammer and chisel, they would inevitably create a petroglyph that would be virtually identical in appearance to this rayed sun symbol or compound eye sun symbol on Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns. When one synthesizes the hypothesis of Ronald Giovanelli, that's plural, Ronald Giovanelli, Rolf Sinclair, and others, that the radiating sun motif was inspired by ancient observations of total solar eclipses, with the hypothesis of Marija Gimbutas that the radiating sun motif is a compound eye sun symbol, more logically seen as a radiant divine eye, one arrives at an inevitable conclusion. It becomes obvious that the prehistoric artists from a diversity of ancient cultures who carved these radiant divine eye motifs onto stone monuments in numerous regions of the earth, and who likewise painted them onto the walls of caves, imprinted them into their pottery, wove them into their fabrics, and even tattooed them onto their bodies, were evidently witnesses to one or more total solar eclipses during their existence. On recognizing the distinct similarity in appearance of the total eclipse sun to an eye in the sky, also known as an eye of God, and I will say that this term eye of God is actually becoming quite popular amongst modern 20th century and 21st century eclipse observers. If you search eye of God, total solar eclipse in Google or another search engine, you will find various articles and so on where the total eclipse sun is referred to or compared to an eye of God in these reports. So obviously from at least a metaphorical purpose, from a perspective is the word I was looking for. That term is used, So they perceive the total solar eclipse to be either the literal or possibly allegorical eye of a sky-dwelling god or goddess. So I'm suggesting that the people who carved these stone rayed sun symbols and also painted them and so on, it's probable, in my opinion, that they might have taken it quite literally as a sort of a sign, as an almost literal eye, maybe even some kind of divine being. I do know that there is a tribe in South Africa. It was reported, but I haven't been able to retrieve that report. But during a total solar eclipse that occurred in South Africa not that long ago, within the last decade or two at most, it was reported that there was a tribe that believed the total solar eclipse was in and of itself a god and a manifestation of a god. So if this tribe in South Africa can have this perception, then I would say that ancient people could have a very similar perception. But the more sophisticated ones might have taken it more as a symbol, a sign in the heavens and so on. That's why I say, or possibly allegorical, eye of a sky-dwelling god or goddess. They were thus inspired to create these radiant divine eyes as a memorial of the occasion when this mysterious celestial deity deigned to look down upon them from the heavens above. The book Boyne Valley Vision by Martin Brennan deals with the archaeoastronomy of the megalithic site Newgrange, with which Dowth is closely associated. In it, Brennan informs us that And I will just scroll down a little here so we have the whole thing. Another theme occurs in Egyptian literature and mythology, which is also found in Irish mythology. In Egypt, the eye represented the all-seeing power of the high god in all his manifestations. The Irish regarded the sun as the eye of the heavens. The Irish word suil, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, etymologically speaking, means sun, and is cognate with the Welsh hul and the Latin sol, and later acquired the meaning eye. A closer parallel with the Egyptian use of the symbol is found in the story of Balor, the huge one-eyed being who slew his enemies with his glance in the mythological battle of Moytura. The theme is repeated in Irish literature throughout the ages, and in the cycle of tales concerning Finn McCool, Gaul the One-Eyed has these powers. It is possible then that the ray of light which enters the cave at Newgrange also signifies the omniscience and the omnipotence of the creative spiritual force. So Martin Brennan is suggesting that the light entering the winter solstice sunrise aligned passage of Newgrange is itself symbolic of the omnipotence of, shall we say, the creator. Understanding that the compound eye-sun symbol petroglyphs carved into Dowth's Stone of the Seven Suns were almost certainly inspired by, and even quite accurately depict, the total solar eclipse eye of God that was seen looking down from the heavens above Ireland during prehistoric total solar eclipses, I have reasonable grounds to hypothesize that these radiant divine eyes may have been intended to symbolize the omniscience of the creative spiritual force, aka the creator of the universe. The prehistoric people who constructed Dowth and the other Boyne Valley passage tombs such as Newgrange, Knowth and Locrew, etc., probably perceived the creative spiritual force to be allegorized in the total eclipse sun's similarity to a gigantic eye staring down from the sky, and responded to it in their religious rock art. Like other ancient cultures, the prehistoric Irish passage tomb builders